need to default. Representative Mo Brooks, a Republican of Alabama, joins us right now. And Congressman, we welcome you. Thanks for joining us. Let's listen to something the president said about this yesterday.
There's no business person out here who thinks this wouldn't be a big deal. Not one. You go to anywhere from Wall Street to Main Street and you ask a CEO of a company, or ask a small business person whether it'd be a big deal if the United States government isn't paying its bills on time. They'll tell you it's a big deal. It would hurt.
You add in the markets, T-bill yields have skyrocketed this week. Japan and China have issued warnings not to let this happen, but yet you feel like this is not a big deal. Do they have this wrong?
Absolutely. I don't know who shared that information with you, but it's inaccurate. Not raising the debt ceiling is a big deal. However, continuing to be financially irresponsible and racking up more and more debt long term will result in insolvency and bankruptcy of the United States government. That's a bigger deal, and that's the threat we have to address, and we need to address it quickly.
Well, let me ask you this, Congressman, because the nation's largest manager of money market funds, that's Fidelity Investments, is saying that it is no longer holding any U.S. government debt that comes due around the time the country could hit the borrowing limit. This is one major money manager. What if we see more? Is this going to cause massive dislocation in these markets, the fact that you guys are going back and forth and unable to come together?
Well, actually, we haven't been going back and forth. The president, as you well know, has shut himself into the White House and refused to negotiate with the elected members of the United States House of Representatives who are trying to be financially responsible. My position is real simple.
As you know, the House leaders are going to the White House tomorrow, sir. Boehner and Kander and company are going to the White House to meet with the president at his invitation, and he's meeting with the Democratic leaders today. So there is some back and forth. But the question really is...
Well, now, wait a second. For 8 days, there has not been this back and forth. There's been one meeting in which the president said there would not be negotiation.
Yeah, you're right.
But now you will tomorrow. But
I hope so, but if he brings us over again to say there aren't going to be negotiations, we get nowhere.
Fidelity says they feel like if they were holding T-bills that come due this month or next month, they wouldn't get paid. And, you know, that there's a fear out there that we will not be paying our obligations when the time comes. That is a big deal. Don't you agree?
Okay. Well, you use the word obligations different than the president uses the word obligations and different than the way I use it.
Are we going to quibble about the word?
Absolutely, because the president is distorting the way in which financial markets normally look at that word or look at the word default. Default in the financial markets primarily consists of whether we, the United States government, are going to pay our creditors. And we have plenty of money to pay our creditors. It's about a 10-to-1 ratio, tax revenue.
Tell that to Japan. Tell that to China. They're all worried that come this October 17th deadline, they're not going to get paid.
And they should be worried because this president may decide not to pay our creditors. That's the risk. It's not whether we have enough money to pay our creditors. It's whether or not the President of the United States is going to violate the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution and not pay our lawful debts. It's whether the President of the United States is not going to allocate out of that $2.5 trillion in revenue we have on an annual basis the hundreds of billions of dollars it takes to pay interest on the debt. That's the issue. I can't control the President in that regard, but the House has passed legislation that would force the President to pay our creditors first and foremost, but unfortunately, Harry Reid and the Senate Democrats and the White House have blocked it.
Now, Congressman, I guess what we're trying to get at is the fact that, you know, in any scenario, we are relying on investors from all over the world to buy our bonds. Every Thursday, the country rolls over approximately $100 billion in U.S. bills. Are you worried about this rollover? If U.S. bondholders are deciding that they want it to be repaid rather than continuing to roll over, what are the ramifications? Now, the president said he is not going to negotiate at all. What do you want to hear from the president?
I want to hear something from the president that indicates he's going to be financially responsible. That's the battle here in Washington between people who are financially responsible and people who are financially irresponsible. It's not a battle between Republicans and Democrats, although it's often portrayed that way. And to be financially responsible, when we raise the debt ceiling, we have to address the cause of the problem. And the cause of the problem are these out-of-control deficits. So we need to either cut spending in association with raising the debt ceiling or pass a balanced budget constitutional amendment that long-term will prevent us from ever having to debate this kind of crisis again.
But in the meantime, you've got these rollovers, and that's going to perhaps eat into any money that's there. If investors decide they don't want to roll over anymore, be paid now, what are the ramifications? Are you thinking about that?
I am thinking about that and a number of other things, and that's why it is important to raise the debt ceiling, but it is more important to do what is necessary to prevent an insolvency and bankruptcy of the United States of America that would be debilitating to our country and would be, quite frankly, utter economic chaos and destruction. That's the bigger picture that we have to look at, and I'm more than willing to raise the debt ceiling so long as we also take into account the financial risk of blowing through the $17 trillion debt mark to the $18 trillion debt mark to the $19 trillion debt mark without doing anything that is financially responsible to minimize the risk of this debilitating insolvency and bankruptcy of a country that it took centuries of our ancestors to build.
Congressman, good to see you. Thank you for your time, sir.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it very much. Mo Brooks of Alabama joining us today.